Great. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Neil Seidman. I'm the co-chair of the Public Education Committee for ADAA. That's the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. And just welcome everybody. Our webinar today is Tips for Helping Children Navigate Complicated World Events. And our presenter is Dr. Debra Kissen. We're starting a new webinar platform for our webinars today, so I want to thank everybody for your patience. And if you have any helpful comments as we go, you can participate by typing in a message to us or a comment, and especially your questions as we go. If you're on a computer, near the bottom right of your screen, you should see a little link that says chat, and when you click on the little plus sign, a little window should open up where you can type in a message. Only myself and Dr. Kissen will be able to see your comments and questions. If you're on a smartphone, an iPhone or an Android, you should see a little circular icon that looks like a cartoon talk box, and you click on that, and that should take you to a little window where you can type in your question. Great. So we're going to be recording the webinar, so you'll be able to see it again on the ADAA website. And before we start, I just want to say just a bit about ADAA, the Anxiety and Depression Association of America. ADAA started back in 1979. And it's the leading nonprofit organization in the field of anxiety and depression. Our mission is to improve diagnosis and promote the prevention, treatment, and cure for anxiety, depression, and stress-related disorders through education, like these webinars, through practice and research. And we really work to end stigma and get the word out that these conditions are real, serious, and treatable. I want to invite everybody to visit the ADAA website. It's a really incredible resource. It's easy to remember. It's adaa.org. Okay, so let's get started. Again, if you can look near the bottom right of your screen, if you're on a computer, there should be a little link that says chat, and you click on the little plus sign, and a little window should open where you can type in your questions. And I want to invite you to type in questions as we go. If you're on a smartphone, you should see hopefully a little circular icon, looks like a cartoon talk box, and you click on that or tap on that, and you should be able to type in a question. Okay. So I'm really happy to introduce our presenter. Dr. Debra Kissen is a licensed clinical psychologist. She is the clinical director of the Light on Anxiety Treatment Center in Chicago. She has a special interest in mindfulness-based treatment for anxiety disorders. In her practice, she provides cognitive behavioral therapy, that's CBT, to children, adolescents, and adults, with a focus on anxiety and stress-related disorders, including OCD, PTSD, panic disorder, agoraphobia, social anxiety disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, specific phobias, separation anxiety disorder, and trichotillomania. And she's also my co-chair on the ADAA Public Education Committee. So let me turn it over now to Dr. Kissen.
Okay, so let's see if this is going to work. Are you guys now seeing my screen?
Yes, it was working well.
Okay, look at us. We're doing something here, Neil. So I'm so glad to be sharing this information, and glad Neil can be of assistance in helping to moderate this discussion. And I'm really hoping it can be a discussion. So Neil and I hope to make this somewhat informal, and I do have some set slides prepared, but this topic is something that it's evolving in terms of how to help children to navigate complicated world events, and so I'm looking to learn and discuss as we move through this presentation. So if you do have a question or a thought, as Neil said, and I know we have some new people that joined, feel free to ask and not wait till the end, and we'll try to get to as many as possible, and hopefully we'll all spend some quality time together over the next hour or so. So thank you all for joining us. And we decided to put together this topic pretty quickly around the time of the election, and to make clear, hopefully it doesn't need to be stated, but this is in no way a political conversation. It's really about, from all angles, helping children and certainly adults as well, as we try to make sense of complicated world events, to make sense of and gain information and manage some of the harder moments that we make contact with as we see different information in the media. So thank you again for joining us for this time. And throughout this presentation, I'll talk about some of the unique parenting challenges that we experience in this day and age, and some common strategies that children may utilize to manage their, I called it news-related anxiety. It's not an official diagnosis, although sometimes in my practice it feels like it could be, with the increase in anxiety that children and adolescents experience when they're confronted frequently with different headlines in lots of different spaces that they're in throughout their day. And also talking about some parenting tips, and have time for questions and discussion, but certainly throughout our conversation, let's also have some good discussion as well. And I want to make sure, audio-wise, Neil, am I hearing me okay?
Coming through loud and clear.
Okay, good. So I'm going to move this over here. So as I said, in this day and age, life has always throughout time been complicated and scary, and disturbing things and beautiful things happen throughout human experience. But one of the challenges that we all have to really manage is the fact that with ever-present technology and with social media, we have a lot less control over the kind of information that children are going to make contact with. And so it used to be maybe what they learn at school, what they learn in their immediate family, what they learn in their friend group really dictated the information that they were met with. But these days, whether it's just walking by a newspaper or looking on their smartphone or on their iPad, or just looking up in a restaurant, and every restaurant these days seems to have TVs and sometimes the news going on. They are making contact with a lot of information that maybe as parents we wouldn't choose to have them necessarily grapple with yet. And Neil, when I expand the little tab, does everyone then see that on my screen? Neil, did you just see that I kind of expanded the tab versus not?
No, I didn't.
No. Okay. So, okay, then I'll just move that out of the way. And once again, Neil, if anyone has a question along the way, because I am going to put to the side that you suggested, so I'm not going to see the chats going on, but feel free to inject when questions or comments come up. Neil, is that okay?
Will do. Great.
Good. So I just kind of did a quick grabbing of different headlines and images that somebody, a child, an adult, might see as they move out throughout their day. Some of them a little older, some of them So police shootings, the Orlando shooting, tornadoes, scary clowns. I have to say, woof, scary clowns. I actually didn't know about the scary clowns until my 9-year-old was hysterical crying at dinner, telling me how her friend has a cousin whose friend knows someone on Facebook that was definitely attacked by a scary clown. So that was one of those examples of, through social media, my 9-year-old informing me of kind of, I don't know if anyone's heard kind of the wave of scary clowns around the time of Halloween, but that wouldn't have been information that I was looking to share with my daughter, but it was nonetheless a moment that happened and something we kind of had to talk about and work through. Neil, did you happen to hear of the scary clowns in your part of town?
No, first I've heard of it.
Oh, any attendees? Just a quick yes or no if you heard about the scary clowns. Neil, is anyone?
Let's see.
I got a yes. Oh, good.
Yeah,
I
we
can
got
see
a yes.
comments.
We got
Okay.
2 yeses.
Got 2
3
yeses.
Yeah.
Wait, yes, some in your town.
4 yeses, 5 yeses, 6 yeses. So, gee, lots of people.
Neil, you are just out of it. I think the bottom line is you need to get with the coolness of scary clowns. So, once again, there's information that our children or adolescents are going to have contact with that throughout time. I remember growing up and there were stories about the Cropsey monster. That's fine. The stories that you're hearing every now and then versus it's really about the frequency and the vividness of the images that we're all seeing so frequently. Once again, none of this based on any political views, just grabbing samples of headlines. So ADAA, is it none? Oh, so 10 and 8-year-olds. Yep. Yeah, I think that was the age range that was really most impacted by the scary clown syndrome. Once again, not a real syndrome, but could have been for a couple of weeks. So yeah, it's a lot of vivid images that we're all barraged with throughout the day and in lots of different forms. So in the past, there was more control that we could have over the information that our children had access to. Always, there were limits. There's always limits of control. There just happens to be these days, I would say, more limits of control. So just a side note, this is not a technology presentation, but there are good technologies out there to try to limit the sites that children can access. There are also apps that allow you to view all of the different information that your children can access through their devices. And I think as parents, you have a right, it's of course a family policy, to say that I will have full access to anything that you post. And that is my right as a parent. So it's a family decision, and all those discussions can be had. But still, there are definitely going to be much limits to the control of information that parents have over the kind of information that their children are going to access. So what I said in the slide is that we all need, I have 3 young kids, so we all need more tools in our toolbox beyond control or attempting to control access to inappropriate information.
Are there any tools, Dr. Kissen, that you have found helpful in the technology area to try to get a handle on what the kids are doing on their devices?
You know, because my kids are still a little bit younger, I think much more so when they enter sort of the social media realm more so. For example, at my children's school, they're giving a big presentation for parents on different technologies that are out there that you can use to view and observe. So I don't know the specifics yet, but there are some, and there are some good technologies and worthy to explore and worthy to certainly think about ways to have some limits and controls in place. So I guess the answer is no.
Addressing the challenge of technology with technology, at least to some extent.
To some extent. So similar to with your home TV, you might have certain stations blocked. There's certainly limits to this, and especially because our kids are so much better at technology than we will ever be. So that's also.
Does anybody in the audience have any comments or thoughts on that topic? If you do, please feel free to type it in. We can share it with everybody.
Yeah, thank you for that, Neil. So the first, I'd say the overarching principle that I would say, which is kind of a vague principle, but that there is no one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to determining the appropriate level of the amount of information for a child, the kind of conversations that are appropriate for a child, what is too much for them, what is too little for them, what will flood them versus what will leave them really still hungry for information. So it's dependent in a lot of ways on the child, what is sort of a healthy approach to managing, taking in some of these more complicated, in some ways scary concepts. So there's not okay, when you're 8, this is the right solution. When you're 9, this is the right solution. But there are some ways that we could try to craft better solutions for our different children. If I even think within my 3 children, the way that they make sense of information is so different, and how much information is appropriate for them is different. So you really do have to take into account a lot of the characteristics of each child as an individual, and find strategies that are going to work for them. So to start with, I just wanted to talk a little bit about 2 styles of information, the way a lot of I see in my clinical practice. I'd say some of the unhealthy ways of tolerating dealing with scary information. So just talking a little bit about 2 of the styles that I do see frequently within kids that have some level of anxiety that they're struggling with. So this isn't an official title, the information avoider, but that would just be one that I would call it within my practice and the children that I work with. So the information avoider, I would say this kind of child goes out of their way to avoid contact with scary information. So if they walk into a room and they see the news is on, maybe they'll ask their parents to turn it off, or put their chair the other way, maybe even put on headphones to not hear scary information. Maybe if they're walking by a newspaper and there's a scary image of any scary image, terrorist, gunfire, lots of scary images that we could walk by, to go out of their way to turn their head so they don't have to look at it. Maybe if they're in the waiting room of a doctor's office, flip over a magazine to not see any scary titles. And obviously this presentation is about children, but I'd say the information avoider profile certainly can play out with adults as well. So, and
that can lower anxiety in the short run, do you think, or do you think?
Well, absolutely. So if you're kind of a anxious little guy or anxious big guy, and you're kind of already feeling pretty revved up, and all of a sudden you walk by and you see kind of an image of a potential terrorism attack, a warning of a terrorism attack or something like that, and then you turn your head away, you don't look, or you're watching a scary movie and you close your eyes, you get some short-term relief as the scary stimuli has been removed. And so in some ways, the challenge of avoidance is that it can be really, really reinforcing. It feels very good to move away from something that feels scary. Similar to moving your hand from a hot stove, you get relief. And that's a good tool that a lot of us use. The problem is everything has to be used in balance. And so once it becomes an unhealthy coping behavior, there becomes a sort of chronic avoidance. And then the more you avoid, kind of the scarier the images remain in your head. So avoidance.
In the long run, if a child is an information avoider, is that going to make the anxiety problem more difficult over time.
Yeah, absolutely. So for someone who just sort of has more of a self-care, like, you know what, I've had a long day. I don't feel like watching the news and seeing a ton of scary images. Or a kid, like, you know what, I'd rather a happy movie. I don't feel like seeing something scary. That's fine and it's good. But it's for when it becomes this chronic state of avoidance that it does actually bring on a higher state of long-term, not long-term for the rest of their life, but more overall anxiety. So I tell people you get short-term relief, but more overall anxiety. And I tell people, and we'll talk about this, the more you make contact with the scary information, expose yourself to it in some ways, and we'll talk about how to do that. So kind of the short-term pain, long-term gain, where you actually kind of you habituate to some information so that it doesn't become a bigger problem. Does that make sense? I know it's kind of a complicated concept in some ways. One other just about this slide is that a common parent reaction for these information avoiders is that it is so exhausting. It is so hard to see your child scrunched over or looking so scared or not wanting to enter a room that you might ahead of time go into an office and move. If you see anything scary, move that out of the way or turn off a TV. And so you're kind of also playing this role of scanning the environment to remove any anxiety-provoking stimuli in excess that it becomes actually an enabling behavior that parents play. And Neil, were you about to say something?
Yeah, so it sounds like this is a way of coping with anxiety, with the child maybe coming up on her own to keep that information at bay, and then maybe the parent kind of joining in. Oh, my kid is so sensitive, and I better, try to make sure that he doesn't get exposed to too much disturbing information. So it's a way of coping, but you're showing that, well, over time, this is not the best approach because it can lead to a bigger anxiety problem, because if I'm so used to avoiding, that actually can increase my anxiety.
Yeah, and I always kind of go back to simple phobia because I feel like it highlights it the best. But think about a child who's afraid of dogs. So when they go to a friend's house, oh no, they have a dog, can you lock the dog up? Or oh no, I don't want to go to that person's house, they have a dog. And oh no, actually, I don't want to join the cross-country running team because I might bump into a dog in the park. And oh no, actually, I don't want to go to any parks. Parks have dogs. Oh, I don't want to go over Thanksgiving, that family has a dog. So the avoidance, like, I don't have that terrible rush of fight or flight response in my body. That feels nice. And then it grows. So kind of the next slide that I have here, that kind of got a little messed up. So it's the anxiety monster. So I use that kind of expression with kids a lot or with adults, the worry monster. So don't feed the monster. So I wrote here, I grow big and strong when you avoid facing your fears. So I tell kids and parents, it's like giving your worry monster a snack, maybe even like a super powered smoothie protein pack shake every time you avoid. So the worry monster loves avoidance because it kind of keeps the fear in place, like not looking under your bed to see if there's a boogeyman. And then your under your bed keeps being very, very, very scary until you just get all the bravery you could muster up and look under your bed and realize that it's maybe a little dusty and maybe some lost socks, but there's no boogeyman under your bed. And it's the same thing with facing your fears. When you face your fears, what you learn is that it's not the worst scenario isn't going to happen, and you can handle it. So even if the worst scenario, God forbid, does happen, that you could handle it. So you get stronger every time you face your fear.
So how do you help a child to do that who's, say, avoiding news and headlines?
Yeah, and and I was going to go into it a little later on, actually, but this makes a lot more sense. I could kind of talk about a case example of a little girl, I'll call her Chloe, who let's say, I think 10 years old, who just lovely, sweet, intelligent, wonderful young girl who has just lots and lots of worries, kind of a generalized anxiety profile, and lots of worries around, oh no, is a burglar going to break into the house, or oh no, is something bad going to happen, or even just, oh no, I don't know what to expect when I go do this activity. Am I going to be able to handle it? So just a lot of discomfort, lack of tolerance of uncertainty. And so the way this would play out with also news information, worries like, oh no, is something bad going to happen to mom and dad? And oh no, is whenever she would see a scary headline, like, oh no, could there be a terrorism attack or a mass shooter in my school? So if she would see a news article or any news about a mass shooting, she would get very anxious, and she would avoid that. So it did become the case where the parents would, if they were about to enter a restaurant and the news was on, maybe go to a different restaurant, or certainly ask them to, of course, it's not always ideal to have the news on when you're eating, but ask to turn it off or move all newspapers, all that stuff that I was just referring to. And so we kind of did an exposure in session, and it was around something that she just sort of heard a glimpse of I think it was on like a childhood, she heard a little glimpse of information about like the young girl who was a terrorist in one, it was a recent news event, I think at a wedding maybe, was a suicide bomber. And so that was a recent news event, and she heard a little bit about it, and so we started the session. She was at maybe an 8 or 9 of anxiety about that concept. And so once again, we can't control the information that our kids hear. I don't know if maybe she just walked by a newspaper and saw that headline. It was probably something like that. So in session, I found the article, and what we did was I had her read that same article that she had just seen a glimpse, a headline. We pretty much spent, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes of the session reading that article, and then we read it again, and then we read it again, and then we read it again. We maybe read it 10 times, 20 times, and by the end of that process, her anxiety was maybe at a 3 or 4. So yes, it was sad, and it was disturbing, and it was hard to imagine that someone her age, I don't remember, it could have, been in that much pain or suffering, and that happened. But her actual anxiety was much lower as she faced read the article, and we talked a little bit, and she asked them questions, and so that would be a way to practice helping the information avoider.
It also sounds like that would be an opportunity for both the child and the parent to learn something even bigger than that particular news item, to be unafraid of that news item, but also to learn that facing my fears in a manageable way is a really wonderful way of addressing anxiety.
Yeah, and it certainly generalized to, a lot of the things that she would then practice, whether going to a swim meet or just that whole concept of facing your fears, which sometimes feel more complicated when it's something like this, like a scary news event. But it's not really that different if you find the right ways to play around with it. So another, I'd say a frequent flyer in my practice, and I'd say in anxiety disorder treatment centers, I said the chronic reassurance seeker. So this would be the kid, and it could be also the same kid. You certainly can be an information avoider. I'd say the chronic reassurance seeking, these qualities can overlap or they could not overlap. But so this is just to always ask, is it going to be okay? Do you promise everything's going to be okay? Do you promise you're going to be here in the morning? Do you promise nothing bad's going to happen to mom and dad? Are you sure? Are you sure you're sure? And then the child gets a little bit of relief, like, yes, I'm sure the plane is not going to crash. I'm sure, yes, I promise everything's going to be okay. And then they calm down for a little bit, but then they're kind of back at it minutes later, hours later, days later. But it once again is is that worry monster. So you feed the worry monster a snack, and it kind of, its stomach stops rumbling for a little bit when it, oh, okay, everything's okay. But then it comes back and it wants more. So I said here's sort of the insatiable worry monster.
So the reassurance is that the child might get has that temporary quality to it.
Exactly. Same as avoidance, where temporary, like, oh, okay, everything's okay. And then, wait, are you sure? Are you sure it's okay? So it's a temporary fix, but it actually feeds the overall sense that maybe everything isn't okay, because it's really about tolerating uncertainty. At the end of the day, we really can't guarantee that many things, but we can know that we're strong and we're competent, and we can handle what life throws our way, even if sometimes it's hard. And that's what we want our kids to know, that they're hardy and they're strong, and even if things don't always go the way we want, that still we can handle life.
Dr. Kissen, one of the problems that I see as you're talking with reassurance is if the child is depending on the reassurance from her parent to feel calm, to address the anxiety that they're feeling at that moment, and they get used to that way of coping with their anxiety, is that building that inner strength and confidence, or is it kind of building a habit of having to get that relief from the outside? From what if mom or dad's not there? What if mom or dad isn't in a good mood that day? Then they're really in a fix.
Right, exactly. And you know, you see it a lot as when kids don't build that self-soothing muscle. Some kids are just really, it's genetically, some people are born very good at self-soothing and good at just having this overall sense of everything's fine, even if sometimes things aren't that fine. And some kids have a little bit of a natural, stronger signal of, oh no, what if something's wrong? And so when, like you said, always getting it from the outside, like, yes, everything's okay, and then not learning how to find that inner voice of, in some way, somehow, everything is just going to be okay. That
how do you show a child how to do that, how to start doing that?
Mm-hmm. Well, so we want to kind of get out of their way and have them learn how to work that muscle for themselves. So ways to play around with that, like in session, I might offer rewards for kids if they could, maybe if someone's asking like 10 times a day some kind of reassurance-seeking question, or 5 times, if you could get through the day, you get 2 reassurance-seeking questions, and then after that, you know, like I said here, I'm going to moo like a cow, or I'm going to just fly away, or I'm just going to like pretend that I hear the wind blowing. And just, you know, because you're not trying to punish, it's not a punitive experience, but you're just showing the child that we're not going to let the worry monster boss us around. So and then in those moments, them having to kind of find another way to cope. So they use their 2 reassurance-seeking questions, and then that moment they have another thought of, oh no, what if, I wrote here, like, what if a terrorist attacks my school? But they already kind of used their 2 bonus, their 2 rounds. Like, okay, well, how could you reply to what is a rational response to that question? So if your worry monster is saying, what if a terrorist is going to attack my school? What is a rational response to that question? Oh, it looks like somebody's asking if the slides will be available for download. Neil, the presentation is up, but do we offer the slides for download? Because I would be fine.
We're going to figure that out. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to do that today, but thanks for the question, and we will figure that out, so we'll have a way of doing that.
Yes. Yeah, so thank you.
But for now, we can say to everybody that the whole presentation will be available to view again. But we'll look into seeing how we can make the slides available.
Yeah. So practicing that rational response to what if a terrorist attacks my school, and maybe what are ways to, what would the cool cat, what would the calm guy respond to that? Well, it's very unlikely that it's going to happen. I wrote here, the chances there's a greater chance I'm going to win the lottery. There's, making up a number here, there's 5 million schools in the United States, and it has happened, I don't know, unfortunately too many times, 10 times. So 10 out of 5 million, that's still a 1 in a million chance. So practicing responding in different ways, or in those moments when the worry monster has asked a scary question and you want reassurance, maybe practicing after you give yourself a rational response, practicing redirecting and doing something else and not giving in to the worry monster. That right now everything is safe and sound, so you don't need to answer the worry monster even though it wants to know for sure that everything's okay. So by doing these things, you're kind of working the muscle of tolerating uncertainty.
And the child is learning these skills that are building his confidence and ability to cope with anxiety without having to always depend on the parent.
Exactly. So some common, I call these common pitfalls when a child is inquiring about a complicated world event or complicated information that a parent might feel is beyond their developmental level, maybe responding, well, this isn't an appropriate topic to talk about, or maybe attempting to just kind of quickly find a segue to a new topic, maybe just altogether ignoring the inquiry, maybe sharing too much information and really getting into more details than what the child is truly asking about and needs to know. Maybe just talking a lot versus listening to what the child is asking. I wrote here, assuming that the emotional experience that you're feeling about the election or about a world event is similar to when a child is inquiring what they're experiencing, and they're having their own experience, which might be very different than the one that you're feeling. And then I also put here, enabling the child to excessively avoid age-appropriate information. So there's certain information that it's good to avoid, but when it's information that, let's say, all their other friends could tolerate, that might be a sign if in a different realm. But for example, a child I had a client who wouldn't go over to sleepover parties or different parties because they might show a Disney movie like The Lion King or some other movie where a parent dies. And actually Disney movies have some really sad themes, but their peer group was able to tolerate that movie and that kind of information. So if your child is unable to tolerate something that their average peer could handle, that might be a sign that the sort of excessive information avoiding. Did any questions pop up at this point, or are we still moving along?
I want to invite everybody if you have a comment or a question.
Yeah, a question, or if there's something that a direction you'd like to go with our talk right now. So one tip that I have is it's really about just being an accessible, available sounding board. So what I said was, and what we all know is life gets so busy that to have a few moments that without distraction, that to be available to your child just for an open conversation, any topic that they care to talk about, and really set a timer and put away cell phones and turn off the TV, and is there anything that's on your mind, anything you want to talk about? And in those moments,
really meeting your child on his level, really giving him the opportunity to let you know what he's ready for.
Yeah, just hearing where they're at. And it might end up that they don't have anything to say, and then you could just sort of sit there and enjoy the quality time together. But if they do have something that's sort of on their mind, knowing it's a safe place that they could just bring up anything that they're, and who knows what information it might come up, whether it's about world events or something going on in school, but really carving out that time and prioritizing it, and 5 minutes can go a long way in just making yourself available to your child. Another tip is certainly speak less and listen more. So when a child is, or an adult, anyone, we all could do a better job of speaking less and listening more. But when a child is struggling with a complicated concept, just kind of asking questions and understanding where they're at with it, and through the process of talking through what you're struggling with, one normally comes to their own conclusion much better than by hearing. We tend to, when somebody talks, get distracted, not listen quite as much as if as we're talking through something, we start making sense of it ourselves. So for example, I had a client, a young boy that came in, probably around 8 or 9, after the election, saying he's really anxious that Trump was president and he's really worried. And I just asked him, oh, tell me a little bit more. Tell me a little more about that. It wasn't rocket science. I certainly, it wasn't, it was nothing psychologist worthy, but just him having a little bit of room then to say, well, I just don't really know what to expect. And you know, I've heard some scary things, but then again, maybe he's going to do a good job, and actually, maybe it could be exciting, and you know, maybe it will be okay. And you know, and he just kind of talked through it in probably 2 minutes, and then he was ready to talk about something different and do something different. So if I assumed how he was feeling or what that meant to him, that he was anxious about the election, I would be injecting a lot of my own thoughts, feelings, beliefs. But what it meant to him in that moment was very specific to what it meant to him. So we often don't need to say much to help our kids gain clarity, and more just be available to listen.
Very good. It's a wonderful illustration.
So, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's obviously a very simple concept. Please.
On this slide, I have a question towards the bottom of the slide. It's okay to share that you too are confused. Modeling, tolerating uncertainty. Could you say more about that? Tolerating uncertainty.
Yeah, so I think as parents, sometimes we think, or even as educators, we think that we're supposed to have all the answers. And if we show that we don't know, somehow that makes us ill-equipped or ineffective, or in some ways it's scary that, oh no, if I show my child that I'm scared, or if I show my child that I'm sad or that I'm confused, I'm gonna that will frighten them, or that will make them uncomfortable. But really it's modeling humanity and modeling that it's okay to not have it all together, and it's okay to just kind of be working our way through something, and not needing to be perfect at handling everything. And I do think a lot of parents are uncomfortable doing that, but it's a really beautiful thing for their children to witness.
Yeah, great.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So we have just a few minutes left today, and I want to invite everybody in the audience, if there's like an issue that
that would be great,
that you've come up with your kids, having to do with anxiety about what's happening in the world, or about things that they hear from their friends or on social media, take a moment and just type it in, and we can talk about it.
Neil, thank you so much. That's a really nice idea. And the only thing I ended with that I would highlight is all of this is very, it's something that we all experience, and it's all very normal, and all children experience. If it gets to the point where it seems like they're under, in general, with anxiety, with other symptoms, if it seems like they're under pretty moderate to severe distress, or if it seems like their functioning is impaired, they're not willing to do the book report because the book had kind of a scary topic, or it's interfering with developmental milestones, they don't want to go to a sleepover, or they don't want to go to a party because there might be a video game, and that video game had a really scary, weird shooting game in it, and that freaked them out, then it might be time. There are ways to get a little extra help, and ADAA has a wonderful list of providers that to get, I tell parents just getting a coach, working with a therapist, an anxiety specialist for a little bit to help them. A lot of parents sometimes fear, oh no, I don't want to make my child into a permanent patient. If I get them when they're 8 or 9 going to see a psychologist, they're going to be talking to someone once a week for the rest of their life. And I make it very clear, sometimes you meet once or twice or a couple of times. It in no way has to be a long-term endeavor, that if you catch a symptom early and get a little help, it's amazing how quickly kids are so resilient, and they really pull out of things so quickly. So don't fear. Sometimes a little external help can go a long way. Okay, that's my last point. So Neil, did anyone have a question?
Waiting for questions. There's room if anyone has something they'd like to ask or
comments.
Oh, wait a minute. Here we go. My 7-year-old son is consistently a high performer, and I think she's still typing. Oh, here we go. But he has a hard time if he's not perfect. So an issue with perfectionism. And then he's not perfect, and then he never wants to try again.
Yeah, and that's super... Oh, I just had an echo. Do you hear me have an echo, or is it just me?
Yeah, you're coming through fine.
Okay, good. So yeah, that's a very common kind of perfectionism profile, and there are ways to play around with that concept by rewarding. I tell kids sometimes going to the imperfect gym, and maybe you could set up a little reward system for every day doing one thing imperfect, like making an imperfect piece of art and then like, yay, and hanging it up, and they get 1 brave point for practicing doing that imperfect, or practice writing really messy, or practice writing a really bad story. And you could even model it as a family. Like you could practice, I keep coming up with like artwork, or there's so many things we could all do imperfectly. So really reinforcing that's good, and that's a good exercise to practice tolerating doing things imperfect.
I love those ideas. It's like there's a playful aspect of it, and interacting with the child and the family, and the child might be having an opportunity there to learn something different than what they might be learning in their school. If the school is what is he, 7 years old, so 2nd grade, and he gets the message that he's supposed to perform well, and if he does, he gets rewarded, and that part's fine. But then what you're saying is adding to that. Well, how about getting rewarded for not being perfect, and what could that add?
Right, because the only way we really grow is by kind of moving out of our comfort zone and doing things that we're not going to know how to do well until we learn that new thing. So you could even as a family go do something that you're both going to flail at and not know how to do something fun. Indoor, I don't know, has anyone ever done the indoor skydiving, or just something that it's fun to not know what you're doing. And sometimes it's fun to do something playful.
Yeah, great. Okay, so we got a message that said, can you see my message? And the answer is no, so type it in again, please. And we just got to thank you for those ideas that you just shared. I love that, making it playful and learning. Okay, here we go. Here's a question. How do I find a local anxiety therapist?
Yeah, and so on the ADAA website, the Find a Provider tab, do we have that on the beginning of the slide? Well, yeah.
Yeah, if you just go to adaa.org on whatever device you're on, whether it's a laptop or a smartphone, and you should see pretty easy to find the link to find a therapist.
Yeah, and if for some reason you don't have somebody locally, I know I think ADA is in the process of trying to find individuals that maybe can offer from more distance. If for some reason you're somewhere that there isn't a local provider, I guess don't lose hope, because there's ways to access this information even if there's not somebody near you.
Yeah, even somebody in the same state. Very often will offer distance sessions by phone or Skype.
Yeah.
Oh, here's a really good question. So how can I help my daughter know that she'll be safe when she's away from us? She struggles at parties. She worries if she doesn't see us. We try to have her go play with kids, but then she'll quickly come back to us and she'll say she's tired and wants to leave.
Yeah. How old is she, like 7, 6?
If you can let us know how old, 8 years old.
Okay, 8 years old. Okay. So it's really, there's no way for a child to learn that they're safe without their parent, without those practice opportunities. So I would say coming up, I'm a big fan of rewards. I always tell kids that your parents get paid when they go to work to do a hard job, and we all get paid. We should get paid to do something hard in some way. So I'd say coming up with a reward system, and then coming up with a hierarchy to start practicing moments of not being there. So maybe starting with a drop-off play date at a friend's house, and maybe you guys are in the car. You don't want her to have the visual cue, because as soon as she sees you or you're there, her brain is going to think, it's going to rely on that external source of, I need to see you to learn I'm okay. And so the only way for her to then learn she's okay, even though you're not there, is to have those little practice opportunities. There's some cognitive work that could go with kids, but it's really in these building exercises and challenges, slowly creating a hierarchy where you kind of break down the fear, that separation anxiety. And I would say this is like a great thing to work with someone. A couple of sessions could go a long way in helping to come up with those exercises and helping to support you in doing that. But it's really in the doing it that you learn. You can't convince her that she's going to be okay. She kind of has to experience it.
So the combination, what I'm hearing is a combination of some gradual steps,
yeah,
and also bringing in some rewards. Hey, you get a reward when you do something hard, and this is hard, and we're going to make it manageable, and then you get a reward for it.
Yes, very well.
And I really like your input there, but something like this issue, even 1 or 2 sessions could just be invaluable to get some help with how to do this with your child.
Yeah, just setting up a system to help her to kind of very slowly, in a manageable way, face her fears.
Okay, so here's the question that we couldn't see before. Can speak delay caused by chronic anxiety be treated?
What was the first thing? What was the word?
Speak delay. So I guess delay in speaking. So it doesn't sound like stuttering. Maybe he's talking about stuttering.
Yeah. I want to see that question again. I'm not sure if I fully understand. Can you?
So can I guess it sounds like he's talking about a child who can talk to people but is very slow at speaking or delays what they want to say because they're anxious, and so they're going to miss a lot at opportunities.
And what was the question? Can that cause anxiety?
Here we go. Speaks much less at school, so he's not speaking much at school.
Yeah.
And how old is he, if you want to let us know? Speaks more at home.
So that sounds like select mutism.
He's 6 years old. 6 years old.
Yeah, so that sounds
starting to go to school
now. Yeah, so that sounds like maybe some form of select mutism, where some children will speak a lot more in a very, very comfortable environment, such as with their family, and then when they get to school or other environments, speak a lot less. And it also is the kind of thing that a child can practice and get rewards for, maybe coming up with a very tight plan to practice maybe at school, raising your hand and that day, and then you get a reward, and the next day saying 2 words and saying 5 words, and kind of working on a plan to increase the speaking to other people. And
now, would you want to involve the teacher with this?
Yes, and that's the kind of thing that it's very good to work closely with the school and the teacher and have a nice plan in place of creating maybe certain accommodations. So maybe it's sitting in the back of the classroom where a child doesn't feel as seen for a while, or maybe it's sitting in the front, that they can maybe at first write a note to the teacher. So building up, setting up accommodations at first as they're gaining the comfort in speaking more in other settings. So once again, a few sessions and working closely with the school can be very helpful.
I'm hearing kind of the same idea that you had before, where it's bringing in the idea of small steps, and also bringing in the idea of rewards and acknowledging that this is hard work.
Yes, absolutely. Very good summary.
Yeah, he also says, the parent also says that the child avoids playing with the other kids too. So it's not just speaking, but interacting.
Right.
So that could also be incorporated. So what would be some manageable steps that would be appropriate just to get him started in doing some of these things that he's been avoiding, and then bringing in some rewards and working with the teacher.
And I really am, I'm a big fan, of course, of getting that professional consult just to get that external perspective, because as a parent, it's hard, of course, to be objective about what's going on, but having an outside set of eyes and ears to help you do this can go so far.
Wonderful.
All right, well, thank you so much. Thank everybody for taking part in
thanks,
this.
Dr. Kissen, and thanks everybody for attending. And we hope to have a way of letting you know when this is available. But if you check back on the ADAA website, or if you just Google ADAA webinars, that should take you to a link to be able to find the webinars that are available to view on the ADAA website. And we're hoping this one will be available pretty soon. So thanks again. Please let friends and family know about our series, and also consider making a contribution to ADAA on the website so we can continue these kinds of programs. And bye for now, and we'll see you next time.
All right, thanks so much, Neil.
Okay, bye now.